Okay, so uh, hello everyone. Yesterday we have seen the numericals based on our delay calculations, that how to calculate the delay. Today's class we are going to see the third numerical, which we have not discussed in the last class. So we'll continue from there and we'll finish that numerical. And thereafter we will see the remaining portion of this particular chapter, and we'll finish this chapter today itself. So this chapter, this example 3, if we see, so in this particular example, the problem is something related to what we have seen yesterday, but little bit with more details. Okay, it needs little more calculations, and this will give you more understanding of the design problems. So let's try to understand it and solve it. So the problem says that a CMOS fabrication process with the device parameters listed below. So these are the parameters given. Okay, so mu n Cox is this, mu p Cox is half of this. So you can see this. L is minimum length of NMOS and PMOS devices, can be 0.6 micrometer, and VTN and VTP are also given, and then the W minimum, so minimum width of the device which you can keep is 1.2 micrometer. So this is basically a 0.6 micrometer technology in which we are working. So the problem says that design a CMOS inverter by determining the channel widths WN and WP of the NMOS and PMOS transistor to meet the following performance specifications. So basically we have to find the width of the NMOS and the width of the PMOS. Okay, length we will assume that we will keep minimum. Then the problem says that to meet the following performance specifications. Okay, so the design constants are given and we have to meet this design constants. And as you can see that there are multiple constants given in the problem. So the constants are VTH is equal to what we want is that the device should have, or the CMOS inverter, not the device but the circuit, should have the threshold voltage of 1.5 volts. VDD is equal to 3 volt. We have to use the supply voltage as 3 volts only. Okay. Then the propagation delay time the circuit should give is tau PHL as 0.2 nanoseconds and tau PLH as 0.15 nanoseconds. Falling delay, okay, or the fall time of 0.35 nanoseconds for an output transition from 2 to 0.5 volts. So this is what is also given. So that from 2 volts to 0.5 volts, the transistor should have this fall time of 0.3 nanoseconds. Okay, for an output transition from 2 volts to 0.5 volts. So you can, as we have seen, that you can calculate the fall time as defined in our previous discussion, that the transition from 90% to 10%, or rather we can also calculate it for the given conditions. So here in this problem it is given that we want the fall time from, this much time fall time, this 0.35 nanosecond, when the output transits from 2 volts to 0.5 volts. So that is important. Okay, so this doesn't satisfy the condition of 90% and 10%. Okay, but still something is given, so we can, again the procedure will be same, that we have to find that this at this particular voltages our device operates, which device operates in which region. So that's what we have to find, and once you are able to find that, then things will not be difficult. We have already seen that how to do it once we've identified the region correctly. Then the problem says that assume a combined output load capacitance of 300 femtofarad. Okay, so the load capacitance is also given, and it is written that the ideal step input. So assumption says, the assumption is that the load capacitance is a lumped parameter here, and the input doesn't have the rise time or the fall time, so it's an ideal step input. So keeping this into mind, if we design the problem, then how to proceed? So to proceed is like, as you can see that there are multiple conditions which we have to satisfy in the design. So the conditions are that the circuit should have the threshold voltage as given, VTH is equal to 1.5 volt. Delay, it should have tau PHL and tau PLH separately, it is given, and it should meet these requirements as well. And along with that, it should also have the third constant. Okay, so third condition is also there. So this condition is that the falling delay between the should be 0.35 nanoseconds from when the output transits from 2 volts to 0.5 volts. Okay, so this is what is given. So in such a problems where you have multiple constants, the procedure which we use is like it's simple. Okay, it's not difficult. So what we do is we design the problem for individual conditions first of all. Then later on, once we have found the W by L ratios for each of the constant, then later on, out of those this whatever we have found for different constants, we choose the worst case scenario. Okay, so that if we choose a particular value, then all the constants should be met rather than just meeting a single constant. So that's what we have to keep into mind. So in this problem we are going to see that how we do that. Okay, and it is an interesting problem. Okay, so you see as the things are given here, so what we want is, let's say first start with our propagation delay. Okay, so to meet this propagation delay, what is shown here as 0.35 nanoseconds, this is what we, oh sorry, this propagation delay, what we want is tau PHL as 0.2 nanoseconds. So to meet this, tau PHL is equal to 0.2 nanoseconds and tau PLH is equal to 0.15 nanosecond. The equations which we have seen earlier, if we rewrite those equations, then the equation can become something like this. So you see the equation, previously we have seen the equation in terms of for tau PHL we have seen the equation. Now rather than tau PHL, we are writing the equation in terms of W by L. Okay, so the previous equation which we have derived in our previous class, then in that equation, then in that class we have seen that our W by L equation becomes something like this for a CMOS inverter. So you see load capacitance is given, so it is 300 femtofarad, so we have written 300 into 10 to the minus 50. Tau PHL as per the condition it is given 0.2 nanoseconds, so we have used 0.2 nanoseconds, right? Then it is also given the supply voltage as VDD and VTN. So VTN is given 0.8 and VDD is as 3 volts, so we will use this. Then capacitance, mu and Cox is also given in the, this problem. So mu and Cox will become your 120 into 10 to the minus 6, right? And substituting the other values in the this brackets. So if we calculate the things, then we get that the W by L of the device should be equal to 7.9, approximately 8. Okay, then so this is what the W by L for the NMOS is satisfying, which will satisfy the the second condition, tau PHL. Okay, condition. Then to meet tau PLH, if you rewrite the condition in terms of W by L of P, for W by L of P, then we can see that the equation turns out like this, and if you substitute all the values given in the problem, then our W by L of PMOS will come something like 25.2 approximately. So width of the PMOS should be 25.2 times the length of the PMOS. So that's what it means. So for the first constant we found that the W by L of NMOS should be something 7.9 and W by L of PMOS should be equal to 25.2. Then let's see the second condition. So in the second condition what it says is we have given delay. Okay, so delay is like fall time. So here we will, although it is written delay, but in this constant, in this particular thing, we are considering the delay, this fall time. So fall time, it is given that the fall time is 0.35 or 35 nanoseconds when the voltage transits from 2 volts to 0.5 volts. So keeping this thing into mind, if we rewrite the equation and as the output is discharging. Okay, so output is discharging. So if you write that equation, then the discharge equation if you write, and you see the in this particular region our device works in which region. So we have to find that first of all, because it may work in the linear region or it may work in the saturation region. So the same way which the way we have found it in the last class, we'll use the same way here as well. So you see, as our device threshold voltage is 0.8 volt, okay, VTN, because VTN is used for discharging. So threshold voltage is 0.8 volt for the NMOS, whereas the supply voltage given in the problem is 3 volts. So our VDS should be, if greater than VGS minus VTN, then the device will work in the saturation region. So what is our VGS minus VTN? What value it will give you? So VGS is, as you have applied the input, as it is an input voltage, and ideal input voltage, and you are assuming that it is going up to 3 volts. So 3 minus 0.8, so it will give you 2.2 volts. So up till 2.2 volts, the device will work in the saturation region, and from 2.2 volts onwards till later on it will work in the linear region. So our 2 volts, the condition given in the problem is that we want the operation from 2 volts to 0.5 volts. So as you can see that from 2 volts to 0.5 volt, the device is operating in the saturation, in the linear region. So that's why we have used the linear region equation here, okay, at the top. So using that equation, if we solve this load capacitance load capacitance into dv out by dt and put the integration limits, so then we find that our propagation delay, our fall time for this particular condition comes something like how much this the fall time is given. So for that fall time, our W by L comes like 6.1. okay, so you see W by L for this condition comes to meet this condition, we have like W by L of 6.1, whereas from the previous condition, to meet the previous condition, to meet the previous constant, what we got is our W by L should be 7.9. okay, so you see W by L of PMOS is still we have to find, but let's say we have to decide for the W by L of the NMOS. So we have two values of W by L of NMOS. So one is 7.9 and the other one is 6.1. So you tell me which value we should use, 7.9 or 6.1. okay, so in such a situation where you have two scenarios that you get two multiple values of W by L, so we should, as I have told you in the beginning of the class, that we should choose such a value which satisfies both conditions, okay, both constants rather than the single constant, and that particular case is called the worst case scenario. okay, so you see the worst case scenario says that what should be your condition if you will choose 6.1, let's say, okay, if you will choose W by L of 6.1, W by L of NMOS as 6.1, then you may be able to meet this constant of your fall time of this 35 nanoseconds. But if you choose this as 6.1, then we will not be able to meet this particular constant of tau PHL. okay, so to meet this constant as well as the other constant, we have to choose the higher value. So in this case the higher value is 7.9. so rather than going for the 6.1, because we have now two choices, okay, two options that we have to use which value, 6.1 or 7.9. so we have to always choose that value, we should always choose that value which satisfies both the constants. So in this particular scenario 7.9 satisfies both the constant. So keeping that 7.9 into mind, okay, and approximately 8, and if we substitute the minimum length of the device, which is 0.6 given in the problem, so it is 0.6. so if then for that 7.9 we will find W by N as 4.7. okay, so this is how we find the width of the NMOS. So this is the width of the NMOS and the length of the NMOS is 0.6 micrometers. So we will keep the length of the device, we should keep the length of the device minimum. So keeping the length of the device minimum, if you find the width, so then it will come 4.7, because we have chosen W by L as 7.9 rather than 6.1. okay, now the third constant is also given. So with the help of this third constant, we will find our W by L of PMOS. Then again, with the same logic which we have used to choose the W by L of NMOS, we will choose the W by L of PMOS. So you see the threshold voltage of the device is given as 1.5 volt, and we know that the threshold voltage of the device, the equation for the threshold voltage of the device is something like that. Okay, so VTN plus under root of 1 plus 1 by KR, and within brackets VDD plus VTP, okay, divided by 1 plus under root of 1 by KR. So this is what the thing is. Now KR, if you will find, so you see KR is your mu n Cox W by L upon mu n Cox mu p Cox W by L of PMOS. Okay, so W by L of NMOS we have already decided, and that is 7.9. So if we substitute 7.9 here along with mu n Cox, which is given in the problem, so that mu n Cox is given as 120 and mu p Cox is given as 60. Okay, so if you substitute all those values and your KR is equal to, let's say, 0.5. So if you take the ratio, so it is 0.5 approximately, so you keep it 0.5. So now if you find W by L of PMOS, then it will come 31. So you see, now it is coming 31, but previously it was coming 25.2. So which value we should choose? We should choose, if we will choose 25.2 as the W by L of PMOS, then again same logic, that we will be able to satisfy this tau PLH constant, but we won't be able to satisfy the threshold voltage condition. So we have to use which W by L? The higher one. So here the higher value is 31. So we will choose 31 and will find the width of the device. We'll keep the width of the device as per this condition, not the previous one. So L, as I have told you, will keep the minimum. So L is minimum as 0.6 micrometer. So width of the device will come, if this W by L of PMOS is 31, then the width of the device will come as 18.6 micrometer. Okay, so this was asked in the problem, that we have to find width of the NMOS and the PMOS to satisfy all the constants given in the problem. So the width of the PMOS we will keep as 18.6 micrometer, and the width of the NMOS we will keep it as 4.7 micrometer. Okay, so if we keep this width of NMOS and that width of PMOS, then we will satisfy all the constants given in the problem. So you see, this problem gives you a complete design like problem. Okay, so design scenarios it explains, so that whenever in the industry we have to meet multiple constants, so then we design in such a fashion. So that is what the this problem reveals to you. So it's an important problem, and we should like understand this problem very well. Okay, so you see, I mean, so we have finished, we have completed this problem here, and then later on we can see, okay, so this already we have discussed. So this is all we have discussed. Okay, so you see, in the previous, up till now, what we have done is we have discussed the scenarios in which our input is the ideal input, okay, in which the step input is the ideal input. That is, the input doesn't have the rise time or the fall time. But in the practical scenarios, if you'll see, the input will always have some rise time and the fall time. Okay, and we have determined the tau PLH and tau PHL and the average propagation delay for the scenarios in which our input is ideal. It doesn't have any rise time or fall time. But if suppose it have rise time and fall time, so then empirically or like with practical experiments, it is found that we can do it with a simple adjustment, and that adjustment is whatever you have found earlier. If we do the, I mean, if we take the fall time and the rise time of this, if we suppose we are finding the tau PLH, so low to high. So in this case, our input is what? Our output is like low to high. Okay, so it is rising. So we have to use the fall time. So tau PLH fall time, in the other equation we have to use the rise time. So this is how we can adjust it. So what we have to do is we have to take the fall time, then this is empirically found. There is no derivation particularly for this. Okay, that how you got this equation. It is empirically people like done a lot of experiments and then found that this is how you can manipulate it. So mathematically, when they have returned, I mean with many number of iterations, after many number of iterations, people found that this is what the formula will come to. Okay, so this is how you can adjust it. So you can add the rise time, half of the rise time and half of the fall time, the square of the half of the rise time and the fall time in the particular equation as required, and take the square root of that. Okay, so if you do this, then you can find it. So this is, although may look little like illogical to you, but it is empirically derived. So empirical things are done after many iterations. Okay, so keep this into mind. So now let's move on to the last topic of this particular chapter, and related to this CMOS inverters, and that is our power dissipation. So we have already seen that our DC power dissipation for CMOS inverter is, in ideal case, it is 0. Okay, in the practical cases, the whatever DC power dissipation you will have, it will because of the leakage current, okay, or the leakage power dissipation. If you reduces the leakage current, then your power dissipation will be the DC power dissipation, the static power dissipation will be low, okay, will be very low. So the static power dissipation depends only on the leakage current. Ideally, we assume that we don't have any leakage current, okay. So that is why our circuit or our CMOS inverter do not have any static power consumption. But if you talk about the dynamic switching power, this power consumption, then the switching power consumption is basically comes because of this. I mean, ideal here also we are assuming that our input is ideal. Okay, input in the first case we are assuming that the input is ideal. So in that case you will have static power dependent upon the leakage current. So if there is no leakage current, no issues, zero static power. Whereas you will have, I mean, in the previous slide you can see that you can divide the power dissipation, the total power dissipation, in 3 forms. Okay, so total power dissipation I am talking about here, not only the switching power dissipation as well as the DC static power dissipation. So in all, if you consider, so there are 3 types of power dissipation. One is called the dynamic power dissipation or the switching power dissipation. Second one is called the short circuit power dissipation, and this power dissipation comes only when the input have some rise time or the fall time. If the input doesn't have any rise time or the fall time, then as we will discuss in the first case that the input doesn't have any rise time or the fall time, so in such cases you don't have any short circuit power dissipation. Okay, but if there is rise time or the fall time, the input waveform have some rise time or the fall time, then obviously there will be some short circuit power dissipation. Okay, but dynamic power dissipation will always be there whenever there is a switching. Okay, and last one is the leakage power dissipation. So there are 3 types of power dissipation. Dynamic power dissipation is the first one, switching power, which is called switching power dissipation. Second one is the short circuit power dissipation, and the third one is the leakage power dissipation. Okay, so we have understood this, that when this static power dissipation, leakage power dissipation comes into play, when our switching power dissipation comes into play, and when all of them will come into play, okay, along with the short circuit power dissipation. So in the practical scenarios you will have all of them, okay, in the, but for the particular scenarios, to understand the things, we have considered one at a time. Okay, so let's consider the switching power dissipation. So what happens is, see in the first diagram we have first of all seen the this dashed line is your input, okay, whereas the other line is the continuous line is your output. So you see, as soon as the input changes, the output starts transiting. Okay, so for this case, if you determine the power dissipation, average power dissipation, so obviously we can take the instantaneous values of voltage and current, can multiply them and can integrate over the whole cycle. So to find the average power dissipation, the average switching power dissipation, what we have to do is average power average switching power dissipation, we have to integrate the product of instantaneous voltage and instantaneous current, okay, in the range in over a complete period. So over a complete period, so the period is, let's say, 0 to t, okay, and we have to divide by the whole period. So if we do this, then we will find the average power dissipation. So what is our average period of the waveform? So in one period, okay, in one complete cycle, what we'll have is, we will have this charge dissipation or the discharging of the capacitor, and one charging of the capacitor. So this when the capacitor once discharges and charges back again to the same value, then we call it that one cycle is passed. So you see, if we want to find that, then what we have to do is how we can find it. So you see, when your output is falling, when the input rises from 0 to 1, as in this particular thing you can see that your input is rising. So where's my brush? Okay, so you see, if I see it here, so you can see that your input is rising. So as your input is rising, so your output is falling at that instant. So what we will do is in this particular, when the output is falling, so this is discharge of the capacitor. Okay, so this is particularly NMOS is active. So you can see here that in this region the NMOS is active. So here it is this particular region, the discharging of the capacitor takes place, and the discharging of the capacitor is in the opposite direction, whereas the charging of the capacitor in the current flows in the two scenarios in the opposite direction. So that's what it is shown here. In the for the discharging case it is shown in the negative half, whereas for the charging case it is shown in the upper half, on the positive half. So positive collector current, positive capacitor current for charging, and negative for the discharging case. So you see, in the other half you can see that when the input is falling, the output is rising. So if the output is rising, so the capacitor is charging basically. So the PMOS is active in this case, right? So if we find this, so you see, this is first case is our discharging case, and the second case is our charging case. Okay, so basically in one whole cycle our capacitor is charging, is discharging as well as charging. So if we rewrite this equation, so the time, so you see, from 0 to t by 2 the capacitor is discharging, whereas from t by 2 to t the capacitor is charging. So we have to write in the first equation what we have done is we have written the total the time range from 0 to t, but from 0 to t it is operating in two different regions. Okay, one for charging and one for the discharging. So we'll put the different limits. So we will put 0 to t by 2 in one case for the discharging case, and t by 2 to t in the other case. And then once we solve it and substitute the limits, we find that our average power dissipation, average switching power dissipation I should say, is your dependent upon load capacitance, power supply voltage, square of power supply voltage, and the frequency of this switching frequency. So if the switching frequency is more, then the power dissipation is more. Okay, if your supply voltage, if you increase supply voltage, then the power dissipation, the switching power dissipation will be proportional to the square of the supply voltage. Okay, whereas it is also dependent upon the load capacitance. So this is what you should keep into mind, that your average the switching power dissipation depends upon three things. Okay, and how it depends upon, so this relationships tells you very clearly. Okay, so this is how we find our short circuit the switching power dissipation. Then let's try to find one more important parameter which is useful for our battery operated circuits usually. Okay, and in VLSI, as you can see that most of the circuits which we use, like our mobiles, our laptops, okay, so these devices works on our battery operated devices. Okay, so these are battery operated devices. So for this battery operated devices, we are always worried about that how much our battery will last. Okay, how long it will last. So whenever this is the scenario, so you see battery stores some amount of energy. So we want to calculate that what is the amount of energy at what rate the circuit will consume the energy. Okay, at what rate the energy will be dissipated from the battery. So that's what we should know, that to calculate that for how long, for how much long time the battery will the circuit can be operated on the battery. So to know that, we have to calculate the energy consumption of the circuit. So to calculate the energy consumption of the whole circuit, we have to first find the energy consumption per switching cycle. Okay, so the energy is consumed basically whenever there is switching. Okay, so you see average energy required over one cycle if you find, then if you multiply by the whole total number of cycles in which the circuit operates, then we can find the total power, total energy Okay, so total energy consumed by the circuit. And energy is nothing but what? It is the product of power and time. So you see, delay we have already found, and power we have already found from the previous equation. So if we do that, and you see, just directly using this equation rather than directly using this equation, because you see this equation have all the things, this frequency also it have, supply voltage it have, and the load capacitance it have. So rather than, you may think that you can multiply the time with this power, average power dissipation, and your energy dissipation will be C load into VDD square. But this is not the case. Okay, why it is not the case? Because in such a case, I mean, to find the average power or the this inner PDP or the this energy consumption, we cannot use any frequency here. Okay, if you use lesser frequency, then your whatever you will guess, it will give you wrong results. It may give you wrong result if you use the wrong frequency, if you use the lesser frequency. What we have to do here is we have to use the maximum frequency rather, because if you use the maximum frequency, then in that case the switching will be maximum and the energy consumed will be maximum. So if you want to find, if you want to give the rating for a device, then it should be like maximum energy, how much maximum energy it will consume, so that we should give. So this particular power delay product or the PDP is useful in that sense, and that is why we should not use this equation directly to find this power delay product. Rather, we should use the highest frequency, the maximum frequency in that equation. If we use that maximum frequency in this equation, then it's not an issue at all, because that maximum frequency can be maximum equal to what? Your propagation delay. This is what is the maximum frequency at which you can operate the circuit. Because if you will try to operate the circuit at frequency higher than this circuit, then what will happen? The circuit will be not having the sufficient time to have that propagation, to have that tau PHL as well as the tau PLH. Because you see, the circuit should have at least that much time period. Okay, that waveform should be high at least for that much time, which satisfies this tau PHL plus tau PLH. At least that much time it should be there. Okay, so you see, that is why we have used the highest frequency. That's what the reason for using the maximum frequency. If you use some other frequency, then you may get the wrong result. So if you use this, then your this power delay product will come something like supply voltage square into load capacitance. Okay, and the important thing is that it does not depends upon the power dissipation, whether you talk about the switching power dissipation or the this energy consumption, which is called as power delay product. None of them depends upon the device geometry. Okay, so the important thing is this, that none of them depends upon the width and the length of the device. It completely depends upon the supply voltage which you are using, although supply voltage depends upon the width and the length of the device. Okay, so as you keep on reducing the length of the device, then your supply voltage should also reduce. Okay, but the circuit, the design or the power dissipation does not depends upon directly upon the width and the length of the device. So device geometry doesn't depends upon. It doesn't depends upon even on the process parameters. So it only depends upon the load capacitance, that is the total load capacitance, as well as, if you have some parasitic capacitances, that as well. So capacitance it depends upon, and the supply voltage. So this we should keep into mind, and the power dissipation depends upon the frequency as well. Okay. So the last thing is your short circuit power dissipation. So as I have told you that short circuit power dissipation comes only when there is rise time or the fall time in the input waveform. If the input waveform doesn't have rise time or fall time, then there will be no short circuit power dissipation. Okay. So you see, the short circuit power dissipation flows, or this short circuit power dissipation takes place only when there is short circuit current flows through the circuit. So short circuit current flows only when there is rise time and the fall time. So during this rise time, if you will see, so that particular instant, your both the devices, NMOS as well as the PMOS, because you see, short circuit, when you are saying, it is like what? There is a short circuit from VDD to ground. So VDD and ground are connected for some time. So that is why it is called the short circuit. So it is a short circuit between supply voltage and the ground. Okay. So at this instant, what will happen? Your circuit will be near to your threshold voltage. Okay. So you see, at this instant what will happen? Both NMOS as well as the PMOS will operate in the saturation region. Okay, so that is what is important. So if you use this particular equation and you see this particular waveform, if you will see the middle waveform, it is looking something like a triangle, equilateral triangle. So if you keep this all thing into mind and solve it, you will get the average current equation for this short circuit current, and then if you substitute that equation in this power equation, you can find the this short circuit power dissipation. Although you don't have to go into the derivation of this short circuit power dissipation because it is a little lengthy and difficult to understand, but you should know the basic method that how to calculate it. Okay, so we have understood this very clearly, that how to do these things, and with this we complete our this particular chapter and the discussion for the CMOS inverters. So for CMOS inverters, this is the last lecture. In the next class, we will start with the combinational circuits. So we'll find that will be the last unit. So in the last unit, we'll discuss about the combinational circuits, that how to design the combinational circuits, how to find the threshold voltage for this various combinational circuit, the simple combinational circuits. Okay, simple gates like NAND gate, NOR gate, and once you are able to design this NAND and NOR gate, then you will be able to design any this digital circuits. Okay, so in the next class we will see that, and we will see some of the topics related to the layout of the circuit. Okay, so how to draw the layout, the optimized layout. So this is what we are going to cover in the next unit. Okay, and in that unit we will use the knowledge, whatever knowledge we have gained up till now, as well as some new knowledge. So okay, we stop our today's discussion here itself. Okay, thank you to all for listening. Thank you very much.